Thank you. I assumed the red light meant it was on. So it's been 7 years since we got together and devised these protocols for conservation easements and open space. Heretofore, there were pieces of property that were given to the town or put in a conservation easement with no real oversight from any of our boards or commissions. There were pieces of property that were minuscule in size. There were pieces of property that had no connectivity to other properties. There were pieces that were strung out along wetlands that were not needed to protect the wetlands. So we got together and developed these protocols. I bring this to your attention now since several of you are new on planning and zoning. And I met with Inland Wetlands the end of last year to do the same. On the second page is simply what you have included. And let me move directly to conservation easement protocols. Pat, you have been a part of this group or conservation for a long time and know most of this. But if I can indulge you to a refresher, we have some 19 or 20 conservation easements now in the town. A conservation easement is privately owned by the landholder and is placed in a conservation easement with the approval of our organizations with information on that easement, which states what their property can hold or not hold. The earlier ones were boilerplate, and you could do just about any darn thing you wanted with your land. More recently, we have wanted, and I'll get to that in a page down the way, we have developed some protocols for what we want to see in a conservation easement rather than just accept it. In accepting a conservation easement, it used to be that the first selectman was charged by the Secretary of State with going out and walking the property every single year to make sure that it was not changed in its intent, the intent being what is stated in the deed. The Conservation Commission went to the first selectman at the time, Mullane, and since they were never monitored in his history, we asked that we take it over what a mistake that was, and go out and monitor every one of these conservation easements on a yearly basis. That meant going into swamps in the summer. That meant trying to trudge through winter ice. That meant making sure that we had coverage for Lyme disease, which all of us got when we went and did this. But in 1918, Nita Kincaid, Bob Fleury, and I went and monitored every one of the conservation easements that the town had accepted to date. We have put signs up, blue signs, that identify conservation easements on every one of the properties, some 100 yards apart. The signs were placed. We developed a binder, which is terribly important for you folks to know where they are and what is held in it. If you go into the vault behind the town clerk's office and go straight ahead, there are, what do I call them? There are rollers that will separate, and on the second tier on the top is a binder for every single conservation easement that our town holds. In that binder is an identification of by a map. In that binder is a replica of the deed. In that binder is pictures that we took of the original property, which are now all 7 years old. In that binder is a monitoring page, which our staff, the conservation commissioners, go out every 5 years and now monitor it. How did we get that? We went to the Secretary of State and we found out that there was no state rule that said you had to go out every single year and do this. So we then went to the town Board of Selectmen agreed that it would now be monitored every 5 years. If you will turn to the next page, which starts with 35 conservation easements deeded to the town, there's a total of 327 plus acres. And those are the parcel numbers and the amount of acreage in each conservation easement. The next page, if I can open it. The next page identifies the differences between protected open space, temporarily protected open space, and active and passive public recreation. What is not well known by our public, and indeed perhaps some of you, is that not all open space is permanently protected. Indeed, even Patchogue Forest is a temporarily protected state park, the largest in the state. Temporarily because the legislature could change that. And some 25 years ago, 3 years before I moved to town, there was a proposal to put a nuclear dump on Wyassup Road in Patchogue Forest. You remember that, Pat? Fortunately, it was voted down. On the next page, where it is entitled Conservation Easements, it was updated in March of this last year. Every one of those conservation easements was last monitored on the date shown by the Conservation Commissioner and when it is due to be checked again. How do we do it now? Instead of trucking through the swamps in July, we we take a look at Google Earth. We see in Google Earth whether there is any anomaly on the property that is being shown. I believe it's a 300-foot elevation. I'm not quite sure of that. And if we do see an anomaly, we then notify the landowner that we plan to come out and do a walkthrough. There was a piece of property that we did just that because they had downed a lot of trees, and on a conservation easement, which was protecting what is believed to be pre-colonial stonework, they had a piece of heavy equipment sitting right on top of one, turning around, grabbing logs, loading it up, and effectively destroyed that particular one completely. So we go then to our land use office and ask them to write a letter stating to cease and desist. And if necessary, we need to go to the state. Moving as quickly as I can to the page saying conservation easement criteria. One of the two most important pages in this document. And we adopted it back in 2015 and have updated, as you see in the upper right-hand corner, pretty regularly since then. You can read as well as I can speak, so you can look at that and see what the optimum criteria are for our accepting a conservation easement and what are the disqualifying criteria. We want we want property that has some connectivity to other properties so that it can create a wildlife corridor. It can create an environment for a variety of species, not just mammals that pass through our property, but all the way down to spotted salamanders and turtles and frogs, which are becoming increasingly rare. We want land that protects the aquifer. One of our most important criteria as a conservation commission, and indeed inland wetlands, is protecting the aquifer. And we have, if most of you know, the largest aquifer in the state of Connecticut is in our under our ground, primarily in the southeast portion of our town. And it extends into Ashaway, Stonington, and Westerly. Somewhat 20 years ago, perhaps, Pat, we had a predatory developer come in and wanted to put in 400 units off Boombridge Road, which was going to be in four-story buildings, a potential clientele large enough that if they came in a block to any of our town meetings, could have voted us all down in whatever we wanted. Fortunately, it was pulled out by the developer because the economy tanked. It's one of the reasons why, and this is just as an aside to you, one of the reasons why we see it very important to have affordable housing in our town so a predatory developer doesn't come in. So read and give attention to those optimum criteria and that which would disqualify us, disqualify it. One of the most recent requests by the Conservation Commission to not accept a conservation easement was up at Lake of the Isles, where it was proposed to put in over a half-mile long conservation easement that went anywhere from 10 foot wide down to 1 foot wide. You could have stepped across it. And that was to comply with the need for the housing that was put in. We asked for it to be rejected. We would have had to monitor that in perpetuity forever. So every one of these conservation easements has to be monitored on a regular basis forever. That encumbers the town to quite a issue, quite a problem. Moving forward. The next page, which is to the Board of Selectmen from me, simply states the protocols that we asked them to approve, and they have. On the next page is the minutes of January 8th, 2018, where they approved monitoring every 5 years. It was approved by the selectmen unanimously. The rest of the next page is immaterial to the information and being discussed, but it's a part of that, the minutes of that meeting. Next to the last page is a letter to a landowner whose name obviously would be identified at the top, letting them know that there is a means of protecting their property and what a conservation easement ultimately means. The last page is the second most important, and that is if a landowner or a developer comes to you, comes to us, comes to the town and says, we want to give this land either as open space or a conservation easement, we have agreed that these steps need to be taken in order for the town to accept the property or to reject the property. Is it in red in the center? Did it reproduce well? Oh, darn, I'm sorry. In between where it is highlighted, Planning and Zoning Commission on the left and Board of Selectmen on the right. It didn't reproduce, I'm sorry. In a red box, it says Land Use Office Secretary creates the CE file and tracks the progress to its completion. And at the very bottom, which is also, I'm sorry, not identified easily by you, it says the town clerk's office and monitor receives the final file. So if the landowner or developer proposes to put a CE on their property, we need to see whether the town wishes to accept it or reject it. And I need not go through each step for you, but you can read for yourself that initial process. And that, I must say, must be done for us to accept a conservation easement at a town meeting. A conservation easement is owned by the landowner and is not public property. It's property that they have put in that for ulterior reasons, for their need to protect their land. Farmers need to go into the 5th generation of their family and say, I want to keep it as my family has always known it, puts it into either a farm and forest or a conservation easement, or indeed gives it outright to open space. If it's open space, and we have several in town, those open space parcels are all open to the public, and our conservation easement has developed hiking trails on all that are able to hold a trail. They range from the Stewart Hill Preserve to Hewitt Farm, which most of you know about, Hangman Hill Preserve. There are a host of them. In the library and in the town hall, the Conservation Commission has developed 5 different brochures for the public. One is all of the trails in town, which are both on our open space, Avalonia Nature Conservancy, Land Alliance, North Stonington Citizen Land Alliance. Another is a bike trail brochure. Another is a kayaking and canoe trail brochure that we developed 3 years ago on the Pawcatuck River. And one that we take our students every single year. We hike down the historic hiking trail from the library all the way through the town hall, up Trolley Lane, and back again, identifying what our town was 200 years ago, identifying where the tree during our bicentennial, the tree that was a nut fallen from the charter oak, is located in town, identifying where the jail used to be housed in the basement of the old town hall, and other assorted facts about their town. So there are these brochures that are available, and they fly off the shelves of the library. I can't keep them stocked. There are so many folks that are interested in the trails. But conservation easement, I'm afraid I went over my 15 minutes, but any questions?
Yeah, Bill,
Ken?
the example letter, form letter at the end of the packet, is that example, do you guys solicit properties to go into easements, or is this kind of a
Sure.
follow-up thing?
Twice now, in 2013 and 2023, for the POCD. One of the tasks of the Conservation Commission was to identify parcels that we would like to acquire, not purchase, but acquire to add to the open space or conservation within the town. We identified some 25 different parcels. We have written to each of those landowners. We have had 3 excellent responses. That's very small, but the Kincaid property was one of them, where they hope that Avalonia will be able to purchase that property. Red Banker up at the end of Swantown Road is interested, and has put some property on Ryder Road in a conservation easement. And I'm blocking on the 3rd. But yes, we have reached out to some 25 different landowners and have not just said you can give it to the town or you can put it in a conservation easement. We've also let them know several different ways that conservation groups in the state have said, this is ways that you can protect your property on into the future. So it's not just soliciting for us, it's letting them know what they can do with their land. Yep. Yes, U.S. Fisheries and Game acquired a property off Pine Woods. And that was one of the ones that we identified that we wanted to acquire. See, the town doesn't have money to purchase, right? I mean, look at what land costs these days. But to acquire it by either largesse, by wanting to keep their land preserved in perpetuity, this is certainly a way to do it. Okay, you guys, thank you. In the future, as developers come in, this is one of the documents that you need to look at to be sure that if they're offering a piece of property for open space, hopefully it will be fee in lieu of, instead of often what they will give is a 15% of land, which ends up to be junk that doesn't mean anything to the town, that we would have to then monitor in perpetuity. And we would much rather have a fee in lieu of, so that there can be a war chest available should the town absolutely need to purchase a piece of property. So, okay. Thanks for your attention.
Now I have to cough. My question was just that we had all the necessary positions filled.
This is just, he's not, he's just taking a full position on the commission.
Right, but I know that our secretary or former secretary is now an alternate, right?
Correct.
So do we have a board member, a full-term board member who's eligible to be secretary?
That would be Wayne Wilkinson. He's
Okay.
not here,
Okay,
so we're gonna have to postpone it.
okay. I just want to make sure that we maintain those.
Right.
All right.
So
I'll make that motion for Mike Whitestate to fill John Gaccioni's open seat
which will be just
for 2 years. Correct.
Seconded.
Crazy here sometimes. So we're gonna handle it. All right. Yeah.
Uh,
Hello, Kim Bauman here. Um, I didn't know that there was a jail at the bottom of the old town hall, so thank you for the education. And Mike Westgate, congratulations, and glad to see you on the board. The rest of the board members were able to receive, we sent a letter on 11 December, and as a refresher to the board members before Mr. Westgate came on board, our letter was for the request to change the town regs. From the 50 acres that was voted in a couple of years ago to 45. And being longtime residents of North Stonington and owning Miss Beerhaven, we have a farm brewery over in Pendleton Hill Road. We have about 14 beehives right now. It's an apiary that's been there since 2012. We've actually had the property since 1996, I believe. I planted Christmas trees there right before I gave birth to my son. So I believe that's the right date, maybe 94, might have been 94. But regardless, the town, rightly so, expanded on the federal and the state regulations for requiring, as far as the state and the federal regs are, for a farm distillery is what our request was. And for a farm distillery, the state and the feds only require 5 acres. But because we all want to preserve the, the ruralness of the town, and what we love of this town, it was probably most of the members of this panel here who were here voted that in. At the time, Phil and I were working a couple of jobs, and we had the farm in the business for the brewery as well. Since then, we're both semi-retired. I'm retired from the Air Force. He's retired from the Army. He's retired from Millstone Nuclear Power Station. Now our farm brewery is kind of booming. And we wanted to expand our apiary so that we had more bees out there and use some of our products and some of the local farm products here to perhaps getting into the distilled liquors. In order to do that, you need a federal distilling license, but first you need permission from the town. So that's ultimately, that's why we asked for the change, because we currently, unbeknownst to me at the time when you voted in the 50 acres, we only have 48.1. We thought 45 would be a good number to make sure if anything happens as far as surveying, if there are, disputes with the areas or protected lands or anything. We thought 45 would be a good cover area for us, and a small change from the current regulation. There is a big boom across the nation right now, for actually around the world in many countries, for agritourism. And we thought here in North Stonington, there's some great establishments that have been promoting some of the agritourism as well, but not yet any distilleries in the southeastern corner of Connecticut. There's one little distillery over in Groton, but it's certainly not a farm distillery. It's not really an attractive, and it doesn't garner visitors to our part of the state over here to, our beautiful little town. So we were thinking if we were able to do distilling of some of our products and offer that product through North Stonington, we might get a little bit more business. We get more use for some of the other farms products that are in the town. And then perhaps we'll be able to attract people in through the agritourism and expand on the other businesses that we have in town as well through those happy visitors. And that's essentially why we're doing what we're doing. Some of the products, so we currently grow hops. Some of it we use, some of our beer use our own hops. We have plenty of mint and lavender, pears trees, apple trees. We've grown buckwheat in the past, and I want to expand with our buckwheat, because for those who are gluten-free, that really expands our offerings that we have here. So the buckwheat's also great for the bees. Bees absolutely love the buckwheat. And I would like to plant some juniper as well. So juniper, the stuff that makes the best gin, doesn't grow as well up here in the north as the Georgian juniper does, but either one of them can certainly survive well. And bees, again, the honeybees, they love juniper also. So if you do, go ahead and allow us to have a text amendment to the current regulations in town here. We would propose the change from 50 acres to 45 acres. And that's, Phil, is there anything that else that you want to bring up before we open up for questions?
Yeah, so, hello, I'm Phil. We've been doing our brewery for 3+ years with the winery. We don't have a tap room. We have no intention for a tap room because we don't want to have a lot of people come and drink on our property. That's not the intent here. What we are is we're very interested in agricultural aspects of it. This is a retirement business that we maintain, and we like to keep a low-key atmosphere. And if you don't know about us, it's unfortunate, but that's the kind of customers that we're interested. We have our product on tap at Chinook Brewery. We also have all of our beer on tap at Kingdom of the Hawk Winery. So we maintain a low profile, yet we want to encourage agricultural tourism through educational process, through our beekeeping, and through our products as well.
All right, so let me just have one other point. So the farm brewery, the farm distillery, and the farm winery regulations for the state of Connecticut, they're all pretty much mimic themselves. The state of Connecticut purposely wrote the farm distillery regulation in 2017, and it said specifically in the bill when it was proposed that it was based off of the farm winery regulations, which were for the 5 acre minimum and five farming acres minimum. So that is still on the books as far as the winery and this distillery in the state of Connecticut are those 5 acres. But again, we are requesting that you allow us to submit a text change for 45 versus 50 acres here in the town of North Stonington. So thank you for your time and attention. Open it up to any questions you have.
So you mentioned that the state requirement is for 5 farmable acres for both the winery and distillery
For each.
Mhm. And you're only proposing that we change the minimum total parcel acreage from 50 to 45, not the minimum farmed acreage of 10.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? I know in the state here you have for your farm vineyard, a 25 acre land with a 5 acre farmable is what the farm vineyard is here. A farm distillery in town is that 50 acre currently.
Right, distillery is 50 acres. I believe winery just says is 10.
10 farmable acres, I believe it said, yeah.
Well, for the distillery is 10 farmable acres, yes. I was looking at them earlier.
Regardless,
So,
so the grains right now with the buckwheat is probably only 5 acres. We do have our old landing strip where we probably, since we never finished our airplane and we hardly ever use the landing strip, we probably would plant that as well if we're able to, because I do like the buckwheat. It was a lot of fun to grow. It really was good for the bees. And it wasn't thrashing. It wasn't as difficult as I had anticipated, although I do need some help to find a more efficient way to thrash the seeds out of the buckwheat.
We're looking to expand on our buckwheat as well. It's what our primary grain product is. But most of our distillation would be from honey products, making brandy. That's what I really.
So I don't want to jump in on top of anyone else's questions at this time. Members go first. When Mr. came in to ask us about the idea of making a text amendment here at the planning and zoning commission. A couple of times in the past, that because our farm wineries, farm breweries, and farm distillery regulations come into play at 3 different times, that they're not really consistent with each other. Now, something that you're not aware of is the land use department has gone and gotten quote from Don Home Consulting, who did the last update of your zoning regulations. Now, when I took over this office 2 years ago, one of the things that I found in the file was a report from 2012 from Don Cohen that talked about what was reviewed at that time and what was updated. And also, it sort of looked like they'd run out of time and money, and that there were some things that were left undone. So there was a list of those as well. So we've gotten a quote back to Don Cohen for him to look at our regulations from 2012 forward, to also pick up some of those items that weren't done at that time, and also to pick up anything big catchy guys that might have changed that put our regulations sort of out of compliance. So in this budget cycle, so I've already actually turned in my budget at this point, but in our next budget cycle, when we ask for money, I'll be asking for that consulting money to go forward with that, so that he'd be able to come in and talk with all of you and review the regulations and make some updates. Some of this is sort of preventative, right? We don't want to spend a lot of money on our attorney, and we don't want the attorney to find things, or to someone in the public to come and sue us over something that's, it used to be within compliance, but over time has gone out. So we're trying to be, stay ahead of that. So that's something that I actually couldn't tell you about later under report of staff, but just because of the way the agenda falls, I wasn't able to tell you about that part yet. But we certainly don't want to dissuade Mr. and Mrs. Common if they would like to go forward on their own. We had to warn them that, that timetable is going to be a little slower than what they would have to do on their own. Any text amendment, of course, you have to decide if you think that what they're bringing is consistent with their plan of conservation and development, and that text amendment would apply all across, town, not just for their land. So you'd have to look at that impact across the town if you thought that that was appropriate and things like that. But we did let them know, though, that that was one of the things that we would be looking at in this iteration, because we had actually spoken about that even before they came to talk. That because the winery, the distillery, and the brewery, and I guess at this point, we don't really know, is there a reason why they're different? Is there some good reason? I don't personally know enough. I know a little bit about brewing beer, brewing wine, and distilling spirits, but not enough to say, oh, wait a minute, I'm not enough of that kind of a science to say, should these be exactly the same? Is there some reason why they're not? So that's something that we'll definitely be looking at, but we didn't want to dissuade them from coming to talk to you about it in case their timeline needed to be ahead of ours to come. We told them to come tonight and to explain what they were all about, what they were trying to do with their existing business and its expansion, which is what they're trying to do, to not just be brewing beer and doing that farming side of things, but in agriculture, but also to add this distilling piece to it, because the federal and state regulations are not the same stuff. And I can't find a local permit for them and say they're in compliance because of it. That's kind of so all of you will get to decide to get them some feedback of what you think would be appropriate. No, keep it up.
Would you like to speak, John, because you put so much time into this and the fact that I recused myself during the process?
John Gatchon, North Wesley Road. I heard what Susan just said, and that's great that everything doesn't mirror winery, distilleries, breweries. But in state statutes, we as a town can make our statutes more strict. We cannot make them less lenient than the state. But the protection, the things that we went through with this actual ordinance and putting these regulations it was to protect the town. I just want to let people know because some were on the board, Ed recused himself, but the town can make restrictions more restrictive. They just can't make them less restrictive than the state. So I'd like you guys to keep that in mind as well when you're looking at them and going through the actual revamp, because there is a difference. And we looked at the wineries and the breweries and the distilleries in a purpose through all the meetings. And just remember that when you're looking at, you can make them more restrictive, just not less than state.
So we have talked about updating the regulations for a while now, but we've had other things going on with the seasonal lakes and other things. But when we had this hearing on the distillery, it was a very long hearing, and I think we came up with some a good regulation when it was completed. And part of that was the 50 acres. 5 acres doesn't really protect the town, even though the state says, calls it a farm or the minimum that's required. But as we know, to protect the land and grow agriculture on it, you really need a chunk of acreage to make it grow, to make it work. So that's how we came up with the 50, as well as the person who brought that regulation before us had suggested the 50 acres as well too. So not only did we want a bigger piece, but they were the ones who suggested the 50 acres that they felt was a fair amount of land to have a distillery on, if you recall. Yeah. So that's pretty much my comment.
So with us again bringing up the discussion of looking at all of these different alcohol production, farm production, would we want to do that now, are you suggesting, or are we thinking we should just be talking about the specific acreage change and not holistically right now, so that I don't know what their timelines are or whatever, because the whole discussion obviously is going to take longer, but probably quicker than that.
We certainly can't say to them if they would like, we couldn't stop them from saying, okay, if they'd like to move forward and they want to bring it to the board and they want to apply for a tax amendment, they have standing as an attorney. But we also didn't want to be disingenuous with them because we know that we're going to probably come forward and review this anyway. So there are time issues, there are money issues, there are also, just sort of overall discussion issues. So we were just trying to be transparent with them. This is something we would like to be looking at. Throw it out there too, and thought that they should go forward with that now on their own. That we were open to that, or if we decide maybe it can also just let them know that people we're probably going to look at it in the context of all 3 of the 7 regulations.
Okay, so right now, like
That's really up
we're really having that workshop. It's not a text amendment yet.
No, they don't have an application.
Okay.
They're kind of testing the water to you of asking the question, should they bring it forward now happen, and they're all changes to zoning. And you folks have went to vote, so this.
I have another question.
Yes, please.
So one of the other discrepancies between the various types is kind of your location. And did you recognize that for the farm distilleries, a traffic analysis and all is required as part of that application?
We got our farm permit for our brewery 4 years ago with the town, and there's been no change. There'd be no change. in that.
Yeah, it's a production facility, it's a farm, so there's no traffic impact per se.
There's no tap room per se, no.
Right, so I don't know that a traffic impact analysis is required as part of a farm brewery like it is for a distillery.
That's correct. For the distillery, there is a traffic impact analysis.
Right.
Because that's a special permit, so it's because it's a conditional use. One of the predications of that conditional use is that you do a traffic impact study. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the traffic is going to be of a large impact. That traffic impact study is done by a traffic engineer who takes the inputs across other, average, same type of businesses. And they take those out of a specific, there's almost like a Bible of statistics of other similar type businesses. And they'll take that and they put all the mathematical inputs into that to be able to create what that traffic impact is.
Right, that's how I understood it. I just wanted to make sure you guys recognize that that would be required to be.
Oh, thank you for
produced
bringing it
as
up.
part
I
of
did
the-
not see that in the town regulation. I know it's not a state requirement at all, and I
Yeah,
didn't see it in the
it's
town.
124.6
124.6, thank you.
or 1024.6, sorry.
1024.6, okay. Regardless, I would still ask the board to consider entertaining a request for text amendment because it would take a good year for us to get the federal license, but in order to even start the federal licensing process, we need the town approval. So we can't do anything in town starts. So if you did a restudy for all three of the farm alcohol type requirements, say that would take 2 years, then it would be a third year for us
Right.
before we even got our license. So that would be a long. Now, remember, for some quality distilled products, it takes 2 years for it
Sure.
to wait as well. So we really would like to pursue the text amendment if you're all amiable to it. Regardless of, 2 years from now, you all might want to throw it out the window and, make some changes, and our time to you may have felt wasted, but to us, it would not have been wasted.
What's the total that we're looking at? So farm distillery is 50 acres. What was a winery?
10.
And what was a brewery?
It's an accessory to the farm. It doesn't really
Got it,
have
got
a
it.
specific.
I
So a
mean-
farm winery, the farm itself has to be 10 acres.
Yep.
And 5 of that is farmable.
Sure.
Where the farm distillery, it's 50
50.
acres with 10 of it farmed as part of the distillery.
I mean, that's clearly a huge discrepancy. I think you guys have a valid point here. I just don't know what the appetite is for a text amendment specifically. I think that needs to be adjusted. I think that's clearly.
I appreciate that, Mark, but I don't think so. And I don't want to hurt anybody, but there was a lot of time spent on this, a lot of meetings. I think this has only been in place for less than 2 years. A lot of stuff going on, but a distillery is different than a brewery. How many beer
Yeah.
cans do you have blow up? And I understand the whole thing, and that's not what I'm getting into. But there are a lot of regulations that a lot of people that have done this have mentioned to me. And not wanting to start a firestorm, I let the other people that were on this board go through all this without any input from me at all, so the town didn't get sued. And if somebody, you know, as nice as these people coming in want to go to 45, what's going to stop us from
From going to
somebody coming
40
in
or
to
30?
going down
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
32 or something?
No, I get
And
that.
at what point in time, you know, I mean, in some places, you have to have distilleries, they have to be in a commercial area. And
I
we
just
didn't
don't
do
know
that.
how we got to 50.
That was brought up by JC from Trillium. That's what they brought. That was
That
Sweeney.
was just there.
That was based on their
Recommend.
production rate and how many acres they felt they needed to produce
Well,
that much.
Well, the 50 isn't related to the actual farmed as part of the distillery. I mean, we've doubled the required amount of farmable land as part of the production, but we multiplied by 5 on the parcel size.
Right.
So
I-
that's just what happened. I think 50 was their recommendation. I don't think we,
also looked at, like the vineyard Johnson Edward, they only require 5 acres, but they grow 50 acres.
Right.
And go far up on Red Dog, which again, we have to, with our regulation every year. That's why we felt that we needed to do some changes because they're all the citizens. And they got approved for the 5 acres, but yet they have big parcels of land too. So, you know, inconsistent, we're going to try to fix this. The one, most recent one, we tried to do right. Make sure that we have the large parcel of land, preserve the farmland, and to grow the crops as well.
We put a lot of time and energy into that, and this isn't very old. And not that I think 5 acres is a deal breaker on any of this, but the butt monkey here is that now 3 months in, we're dropping 5 acres. What's to say another 10? And we know we're gonna look at this maybe in another year. So, and this discussion that we're going, all kind of going round and round
It was the same one before.
is, yeah, and, but we need to wrap in, other, the winery and the brewery with, so we need to talk about all of them. So that's gonna complicate it even more.
I think, and that's just the vehicle for this. I just think text amendments are also. I have not seen a lot of text amendments pass here because a lot of our regulations are specific to town approval. And I feel like for the board to make some sort of adjustment in a text amendment versus putting it out to the town where it needs to be approved. I think that's something that a lot of people on the board have not felt comfortable with in the past. It's what I've seen. So like, I personally think that there's something to be done there and that could be looked at. I would say if you were to bring a text amendment up, I doubt it would pass. I don't think it would pass this board.
So I feel like I should back up just on 2 points. First, I just want to apologize. I can't tell you a lot of the background of how you got to that number for the distilleries because I just wasn't here. And so I just don't know how you got to that number. So that's not information that I can provide to you. But what I can say going forward is if we do get that money passed in the budget, that'll be available July 1st. So we can go ahead, you know, and head forward with that. And especially if we knew that it was going to be approved, you know, we can have that contract set up and have things ready to go a little bit faster than I think what we've heard you talking about. And it sounds like folks do on the board have the appetite to go forward with some of those things. And we could even maybe make a request to Mr. Boland that that's one of the first things that we'd like him, you know, to take a look at because we have, you know, folks that are interested in that and that the board has brought that up. So I don't see that as a problem for him, you know, starting to take a look. We don't want to, so I don't want to, we can only have so many meetings and so many public hearings with him at the price that we negotiated. So we want to be careful of that, but we can definitely let him know.
So let's say he looks at those regs and he says, hey, these are the changes that I would recommend, or these are the adjustments that you guys should do. Anything that he proposes would then need to go to the town to be approved anyway,
Yeah,
right?
You would have
No?
to hold a public hearing here.
We would do it in a public hearing here.
Not the town, here.
It's not.
But in the
their
public
vote.
hearing, we would still be voting on it. The public would just be giving us input.
The public would be allowed to come and give testimony about it, like, or ask questions.
Okay.
Or say, you know, I don't think this is consistent with our longer term plan, which is fairly new, you know, because of these reasons, so they'd be able to provide input, certainly. At that. And it would be most efficient to try to bring as many of those things together, because it's
Right.
expensive to hold that kind of a hearing for the type of, you know, you're advertising, you're having, you know, a big room of people, you're having the big show, so to speak, on that night. So you want to make sure, also, you know, our town attorney would review those. So you want to try to be as efficient as you can with reviewing as much of that information as time.
That makes sense.
Well, they're not. That's a consider, they're.
So it's a different zone than residential. There's a lot of factors in it. And then you can operate.
Well, again, we're going with the current regulations for 50 acres, backing, requesting that you reduce that to just 45 acres. The town regulation does say that we can request text amendments and you can implement text amendments not more than one time per year for each regulation. So this particular regulation has not been, there have been no text amendments. So we're certainly within that time frame. I do realize that if there is a text amendment, regardless of whether you wait for the attorney review or whatever, there has to be, you know, has to be advertised to the town for 30 days and they can come into your meeting. But we would need 3/5 vote is what we require, would be 3/5 vote in order for it to pass. I am leery of, if you get the budget for the analysis and if it makes the priority to make the to go for changes, and if you all are able to agree on what the changes would be in the next year, I'm still leery of the timeline. So again, I would say we're not asking for any zoning changes. We're just asking for what was seemingly a random acreage number that was put out there because of the people who proposed it at the time. If we had been paying more attention, we certainly would have said, well, you know, that sounds great. And Phil says, well, we only have 48.1. Maybe we should go to the town and say, hey, let's do 48 instead or something. At the time, if we had thought of it, we certainly did. So bad on us for not doing that. You know, it takes us more time and it'll take us more money to go through the text amendment, but we do feel for where we want the business to grow, where we want our farm to grow, that now is the time to ask you all for the text amendment.
Just on a practical standpoint, if the board says that they don't think it's a good idea, but time, always have the right to go to one of their neighbors to add that acreage. With the utility application. That all criteria. There is sort of a third option. Haven't talked about, we have much about it. Not about that. Third option they would have if they decided to not come forward with a second amendment. Decided that really wanted to wait. That was against the timeline.
When we were talking about the farm distillery regulations 2 years ago, I think we were also talking about farmers that do not tenant farming, but lease additional farmland for production. Where did we come on, does that, if they're leasing land? Okay. Okay, I wasn't, yeah, it was 50 acres of their parcel. Yep. He leases other parcels too. Right. I wasn't sure if we had made a decision on if they leased a total of 50 acres, it had to be 50 as their parcel. Okay.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because again, the state regulation, the federal regulation does allow an individual to go rent more property to add that to just make their 5 acres.
Right.
And we certainly, instead of buying an additional 2 acres of land, we would have, plan B would have been, hey, can we rent a couple of acres until the board decides what they want to do? That would have been a great option for us, but it's not an option at this time.
No, sorry, and I'm sorry you guys weren't at the meetings and stuff because it dragged on for a long time. There was a lot of work that was put into it. And the reason that some of these other regulations we have is because of different people who sat up here and they piecemealed stuff. I mean, they, want to count a farm as 5 acres and, it's kind of ridiculous to say that 5 acres is a farm, That was done by people who didn't want to listen to what the board was and then use timelines to kind of force it down our throats.
But I don't think anybody on the board here would disagree that 45 acres is an unreasonable request. So, the final changes, when you make the changes a couple of years ago, will probably be, something above 25 acres is what I imagine. But for our sakes, we're certainly hoping, hope's not a great option, but hoping that you will consider 45 at this time.
I understand that, but if we keep changing the regulations because you guys are nice people and then somebody else comes in, there's like basically no reason. You start losing the character of the town. That
Right.
was what we were trying to
But
protect.
you do understand, you can only change it once every year. And if you're
yeah,
going to go
that-
through
that- I mean-
the wide swath right now, we're just an interim step to what you ultimately will get to. So I guess we're asking, take this under consideration for us for right now. And 2 years from now, it won't be an issue regardless, because I'm confident that you all will probably make it more amiable and match.
I have a question for when the time comes to look at these holistically. With the discussion on the 50-10 split that we landed on for the distillery and the farm winery being a 10-5, when we're talking about aligning things, can we make things more restrictive, or can we only make things less restrictive? I know that discussion has been brought up before in other contexts.
So I think what you're actually asking is 2 things. So what John was bringing up has to do with state and federal regulations. We can do more with state and federal regulations. But when something is actually put out there, advertised, and say we advertise something, we land on a number that's more restrictive than what we've advertised, but without going less restrictive than what we've advertised without re-advertising. Because there might be someone out there in the public who reads our ad and says, oh, wait a minute, this doesn't apply to me, I don't care about this, it's not going to affect me. But then in the meeting, if you make it, so that it's actually more restrictive, then it affects them even less. But if you make it less restrictive, it might affect them, it might be people who would have done. So I think what you're actually saying might be 2 steps that you might want to consider. So at the time that we would make the public hearing and we would advertise what was going to be discussed at the public hearing, and then you folks would land on, whatever you thought it was going to be. When you went to make those motions, in the end, you can make them more restrictive than what you advertised, and that's okay. But you can't open it up.
So I guess then more specifically is when we're going to look at these holistically, the farm winery of a 10-5 split, could that go to a 20-acre 5 or 20-10? It could go more restrictive, but then what happens if there are existing operating, they become grandfathered? Okay.
Because they were existing at the time.
Yep.
They were legal during the regulations.
At that time.
And one of the things that if you had, someone come and appraise your property, one of the things that they do is they actually do a little bit of research. If what you have and what you built was legal at the time that it was built. And first off, they actually keep copies of each of the sets of regulations as we go along. Because in different time periods, there might have been different things that were legal, and that's actually one of the things that we're.
Okay. So do we need to provide consensus on what a recommendation would be to them, or
I mean,
coming out of
I'm
the-
not sure that you would make a formal motion, but it might be a time to think about, and ask questions of what you might consider, because they haven't brought a formal application. But that would be, there's a certain amount of expense and time on their part that would happen, and if you really weren't going to consider it, really the responsible thing to do would be to say to them, we really think you should wait, or we think you should go forward because of, of what we've heard tonight or whatever. But that's why they've come. You folks get to make those decisions and make those votes. So that's up to the board.
I just want to make sure that we left them with something,
Certainly, absolutely.
something, yeah.
Just in my opinion, and I have no sway over the board, this is just my opinion. I would not be in favor of changing anything right now till we can sit down and look at it. We have had other people sitting in Susan's position and things have got all mushed up, and we do want to look at it. There were other things we were going to do back in the day, but people wanted to do things and we did, and it kind of bit us. So I'm sorry, but you can certainly get an attorney or do whatever you want to do to bring it forward, but I would vote against it for right now until we can iron this stuff out, because it's really been piecemealed. Just so you know, that's just me.
I think we have a lot to talk about before voting on this again.
I'm up for that discussion, and I'm curious where we stand, especially holistically, but I understand timelines are around distilling are quite long, and yeah, yeah, it's your retirement.
And the sooner the better. So if it could come up soon, yeah.
Right, that's what
I
I'm
don't wanna
almost
hurt
wondering
anyone.
if we prioritize this holistic review.
I guess I don't really have a warm fuzzy from anybody. I mean, I know Ed would say no, Mr. Bueller would say yes, but for the rest of you, should we go ahead and put in the request for a text amendment? Because there is a fee for the application to begin with and more time that goes into that. I haven't heard anybody here disagree that, 45 acres is not not worthwhile to pursue for future changes or even less. So I haven't heard anybody say there's harm in putting in the text amendment, except for Ed perhaps thinking that, I don't know, I don't see anybody else putting in a request for a text amendment before there's the holistic look. So I'm not sure what Ed's concern really is, but I haven't heard from anybody else really. I mean, do any of you think that 45 acres wouldn't be passed by anybody?
Still maintains a reasonable town environment. It's a lot of land.
Accepting, for me anyway, accepting the request for a text amendment when we knowingly are going to pursue looking at everything holistically, I don't think would be a worthwhile endeavor. I think it would be mismanaged time and effort when at the end of the day, whether it's 4 months from now or 6, you might not have to request that text amendment. Maybe you will, but I think preemptively requesting a text amendment is not the right thing to do at this point. I think we should look at this holistically. I think we should spend a little bit more time on it, right some wrongs that may have occurred previously, obviously prior to my showing up. But I think we should have the opportunity to do that prior to shutting down hopes and dreams and aspirations.
Right. So I guess the next question, if your budget does not allow for that look and change in July, would that be a reasonable request to come back to ask for possible text amendment?
I'd like to ask, is it contingent on that, but, or could we, as a board, holistically look at it without the consultant looking at the whole?
I think if the office is try, go for a budget. Very small ask in terms of the number. I'm sure if we'd gone out to several others, we could have gotten much bigger numbers because he was familiar with our town and with done previous work here. It makes it so that it's just much more efficient for him to give us a very targeted.
Well, I'm also kind of asking, if we together start looking at specifically the subset work, do we need to wait for him to look at the whole package in?
Well, Ben, because we're paying him, I think it would be a good idea because I wanted this gentleman a long time ago and everything has been like somebody sewing a jacket together with patches, okay? And I would like to kind of like straighten this out a little bit, have some normacy to it, you know, have things in place. And so I don't want to go in and do another, you know, let's do this, write it down on a piece of paper, throw it down. I was very upset with all of that. I want it smooth, I want it right, and I want it fair. Okay, so that's what I'm looking at. And I wanted this guy a while ago and it didn't happen. And I, as the chairman, let it slide and it has bitten me a couple times, okay? And you know what? A lot of times when I go to meetings, I'm the only one that's not getting paid, you know? So, and I show up at all of them.
No, I wasn't. Oh, yeah. Myself, I just didn't know if we could start our own internal conversation, this conversation, what we might feel the trend would be for aligning. Right.
My sense is, based on the conversations we've had over the years, I don't see that acreage changing anytime soon. Even if we get this guy to look at it. Like, I don't think that there's an appetite to adjust that number currently. That's just my sense. I don't think your request is out of line or unusual at all. I just don't think, even after we do a review of it, I wouldn't hang a hope on that myself.
Thank you for your honesty.
I'd almost like to see the vineyard go up to that number too. Maybe not 50, but
Jonathan Edwards went in, the rules were very lax.
Yeah.
And we're, you know, going, Edwards winery, good, but if they wanted to use the devil.
another reason we need to have a consultant really make sure we're, yeah.
Focus, it's not all over the map.
Yeah.
And we go through
Yep.
it and, you know, certainly we're gonna be asking questions, looking at things. I mean, when you go and change from 50 acres to 45, it's gonna open up a lot of different places now where someone might wake up and now, are you really doing that?
One thing on the entertainment, you can control the entertainment, does the state liquor permit will provide you with approval to pass entertainment or not? That comes from the town. For any, liquor permit, manufacturer.
Right, and this, so we're not asking for a tap room at all. And for a farm distillery, you cannot produce more than 10,000 gallons of alcohol a year. That's per state regulation. So it's already not going to become Party Town USA. I noticed that. Yeah, you're in a different tax zone if you do that. So I think it was 2024 or 2024 is when the state put that in writing.
But it's more the
But they did base it on production levels that they'd be looking for, but they also could have been trying to keep other people out of the market.
I don't think of that.
Well, I'm just wondering, is the 50 the overall parcel size is more important than the production acreage? Or is the production acreage the important? If you had a 10-acre parcel, that was, well, a 12-acre parcel, that was 95% production. Is that the important part, or is it the overall size of the parcel?
I think it's the size to give privacy to people. The one thing about, you know, Trying to make sure that, conservation. So, you know, as it is, you know, you gotta plant 10 acres and, you know, look at that, and the rest of the stuff has to come from the state, you know. And you could go and have 100 property and not have 5 acres. And more stone. Yeah, certain parts where Glacier River was behind certain areas. Fair enough.
Thank you all for your time. We don't want to belabor your work, but it looks like you have a lot of work ahead of you. Thank you.
So sorry, I kind of already got into that. I did get a quote from that, and very simple quote. I could that board and get that going. We also have a house and start like this. Yes, we do. We did have a few things out there, and also just like I said in the summary that I found that I inherited from my office. It keeps it a very nice sort of abstract from the last time about what has been changed. What they sort of run out of money. So he kind of created himself a footprint for, you know, where to pick it back up, which is, I think, part of what he knew where he sort of kind of wanted. It's one of the things that you know, we'll try to make things, you know, we try to make things feasible. So every day folks see that, know that they can get, okay, I know from our regulations, I know I can get this predictable outcome from this and not need to do another. So we, oh, that's a good question. Okay, so let's actually, that was my next one. So the seasonal lakes versus the, you know, the long-term, you know, year-round issues. I had a long discussion on that, the 25 things that here, the things we've gotten right, the things that I was, you know, that I was for different areas. He had some questions. When we went back, let's like start to get his question here. Found out something that they weren't even aware of. But as of January first, that legislate regulation. Know how much they were going to change, and how it would affect what we were already going down the path. So we decided to sort of hit a pause button until they had that sorted out, because legislative regulations have such a strong effect on what people don't do with that. It doesn't make a lot of sense for us to keep going forward without knowing where they stand. So that we kind of hit the pause for now, and we haven't, stopped thinking about it or stopped pursuing it throughout 3 weeks. I didn't, that was first. So that was actually one of the big things that we started to talk about with me, was because we're sort of, there are multiple authorities in what we were talking about, and there's some things that really we have the authority to adopt, legislature has the authority, or there might be things that might tell us are outside our authority, and we can't regulate those, but you might be able to regulate them through ordinance or through other people. So until we know where that like stands, or we don't want to go forward and then have to. So we're kind of in a pause mode for now. So. I think I've already gone through everything. Okay, so I don't think it is. Had just a little bit of enforcement. We've had a lot of our enforcement about standards, temporary time, flags. For the most part, we've been able to get people in compliance with a couple of folks who are moving towards it, like they're better than they were, but they might not be perfect. That's something you know. We have
I just wanted, wasn't sure if I had.
he hasn't made an announcement.
Yeah, yeah. That's not bad.